Well, in order to understand what living my best life is, I have to understand my values, right? Because it's the values that give me meaning and help me figure out what my goals are, right? Because I can create goals, but if they're not actually aligned with my values, I won't necessarily feel like I'm living my best life.
Welcome back to another episode of Your Visionary Podcast.
Your Visionary Podcast.
Your Visionary Podcast. Your Visionary Podcast. Visionary Podcast.
Welcome to Your Visionary Podcast. This podcast is specifically for you and your vision. Get ready to grow. Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Your Visionary Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Brown, and I'm super excited for this episode. I'm bringing on another psychologist to join me and just having a conversation about finding peace through mental health. And so I'm super excited to bring her on. And before I introduce her to you all, I want to kind of give her her background and tell you a little bit about her. So her name is Dr. Robin Rosenberg, and she's a clinical psychologist. She has provided executive coaching in the San Francisco Bay Area and New York City. And she's the founder and CEO of Live in Their World, Inc., which we'll hear more about later. And not only that, she's also been a psychology lecturer at Harvard. She's been a consultant at Boston University Health Services. And she's also been a clinical professor at the University of California, San Francisco. And the list goes on, but all that to say that she's very knowledgeable, and I'm excited to have her on. So Robin, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, how are you? And thanks for having me.
I'm doing very well. It's funny, our last guest said that I should never ask a psychologist how they're doing. Is that kind of true here or no? You don't mind?
No, it's fine.
Okay, awesome. So before we get into the questions that I have for you, I want you to share with the audience kind of like how you got into this field and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, how I got to where I am now. I mean, I was a psychology major, and I always knew that I wanted to do therapy. I grew up in New York at a time when it was sort of a thing for certain people. And I was just interested in what motivates people, kind of what makes them tick. And I also had an older brother who was a psychology major, so that had a big influence on me. And where I am now, so I've been in practice a really long time. And typically I want to learn new things, so every kind of few years or a little bit more, I find something new to learn in depth. And most recently, I was learning about virtual reality, and I had an idea of how you could use VR in the workplace to help people understand sort of the ways that bias plays out and sort of disrespect happens among people from different demographic groups. And so I ended up starting a company to create a program that uses VR. It's not only VR, but we use VR to really help people step into the shoes of people from different demographic groups and upskill them for respectful engagement.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so amazing. And it's so cool to me how you said that you continuously find new things that you're interested in, and then you learn about them in depth, right? What kind of motivates you to continue to do that?
One is just finding new ways to help people. So for instance, I got certified I learned how to do hypnosis and got certified in it, which is sort of, higher level of learning, because early in my practice, I got a job at an outpatient clinic where was a general outpatient clinic, but it also specialized in treating people with eating disorders. And I didn't know much about eating disorders, but I learned. So that was kind of the first time of doing a really deep dive into something new. And then over the years, I could get people eating, their eating disorder behavior was better, but their body image wasn't great still. It's really hard, especially for women in our culture. And so what the literature said, the research said that hypnosis can help. So it's like, okay, well, I'll learn hypnosis so I can be more helpful to those people. So it just, that's, it's both my interest and also sort of what might be helpful to the folks that I see.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I had to dive a little deeper into the hypnosis because when we talked about it before this, I was just very intrigued. So I'm sure the listeners are too. So through getting certified, what did you learn about hypnosis, and what's something cool about it that you can share?
I know what you're talking about. So I actually this wasn't really through my training, because I also write psychology textbooks for college students. So I kind of learned this. I think I learned it there. I don't remember where I learned it. But anyway, there's this phenomenon that happens with when you're hypnotized, for most people, which is what's called divided or dual consciousness. So you hold the reality of whatever you're experiencing in trance as real, and in fact your brain registers it as real, but you also know you're sitting in my office, so you're holding two realities, which is why some people think they're not hypnotized, because and the balance of that may differ depending on how engaged you are with whatever's happening in trance, or your own kind of natural hypnotizability and motivation. So I was really intrigued by that.
That's so cool. And is there a way that people can like hypnotize themselves? Is that possible?
Oh yeah, they can just look on YouTube for self-hypnosis. I'm sure there's tons and tons of ways that people can do it. That said, not everyone is, I don't even want to say easily hypnotizable. There are people who are not very hypnotizable at all. They're low hypnotizability. They can be motivated. They can get hypnotized if they're really motivated. So there have been interesting cases of people who are documented as low hypnotizable, but they also, for some reason, need to have surgery and can't have anesthesia. They may have an allergy or some reason. And so they are very motivated for pain relief through hypnosis. And in fact, in those cases, it often is effective. But the people who are low hypnotizable are highly motivated in those cases to be hypnotized.
Interesting. I feel like my generation has been traumatized with hypnosis because of the movie Get Out. Have you seen it? The movie Get Out.
Yes.
So
I get that. I get that.
So let me ask you this one question before I move on. Is a sunken place a real thing?
What do you mean?
Is a sunken place a real thing? Like, can people really get lost in like a false view of themselves?
Oh,
like a false reality, like live in a false reality.
Got it. So this is a science fiction-y thing of where it kind of, so I'm going to say no. I think is the easiest answer, is that even people who are highly hypnotizable have some sense that they're in trance. Like there's a part of the self that's observing it happen, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think for people who are really, really highly hypnotizable, just like, have you ever had a really vivid dream? And you wake up and there's that moment of like, was this real or not real? Right? Yeah. Or you might be mad at someone because of something that happened in your dream and you kind of think they did it. And I mean, in that sense, there's probably some similarity if what you experience in hypnosis is really vivid. But I have not heard of a case of anyone really losing themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting. I literally had that happen to me this morning. Like I went to a haunted house last night for a work event, and then overnight I had a really like nightmare type of dream having to do with my girlfriend, and then I woke up and she was right there, and like I was kind of scared when I woke up.
Right. So. Right. I mean, that's just another. Dreaming is another form of altering your consciousness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool. So yeah, this wasn't supposed to be the topic of the show, but I had to dive into it a little deeper.
Sure.
So kind of just to bring us back on track, right? The title of this season is called "Finding Peace in Mental Health," and so with your experience in the field and just as a psychologist, what does that mean to you? And I kind of had a high level view, like how does that happen? How can people find peace in mental health or through mental health?
You mean how can they attain mental health to get peace?
No, more of like how can either educating themselves on mental health or um, taking their mental health seriously, whether that be going to therapy, reading, any one of those. Like how
Okay.
can one attain peace, or just one example, how can one person attain peace through mental health? Does that
Okay.
make a sense?
So the concept of peace is a little confusing to me if we're
Yeah.
assuming that people don't have mental health. And so what they're seeking is mental health, right? Or they're seeking peace with mental illness, right? So that's where there are a bunch of different ways to go with the question. I'm happy to
Yeah.
go in any of the ways, whatever. I mean, that's how my mind works. So just there
And
are
I
different ways
and
of
I
interpreting it.
Yeah, and I love that so much. There was a definition of mental health that I want to read, and then I think that would maybe provide a little more clarity. It was from the okay, awesome. So this is it. This is it. So this definition from the World Health Organization.
Yep.
It says mental health, a state of well being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And so when I think of that, when I think of, what it looks like to not have peace, it means, being highly stressed, not being productive and fruitful, and then, not being able to or not feeling like they have the ability, one has the ability to make a contribution to the world.
Got it. So where I go with that is people can have things in that definition and still not be at peace. Right. And so that's where it's the peace part,
Yeah.
right? Because people can function at a high level, be contributing to I mean, is it that they contribute or they feel like they're contributing, right? Because people can contribute and not feel like they're contributing to their
Right.
community. People can be operating at a high level, but not feel like they're operating at, I mean, so, there's the objective reality of what they're doing, and then there's the experience of it, and there can be a mismatch.
I
Or
love
people
that.
can feel like they're not managing their stress well, but if you look at the stress they're carrying, they're actually doing incredibly well, right? So,
So what if, and this is cool, I'm liking this dialogue. I want to ask you what peace means to you, but I also want to ask, could peace mean that there is like the two sides match, right? Like what they feel and what the person feels internally and then what's going on externally. Like there's
that could,
it's the same.
sure. I mean, you could define it however, there can be that, and you could define peace
Yeah.
however you want. I mean, if someone has, as an example, bipolar disorder with really significant swings that are frequent, and there's a limit to how helpful medication is. They'll stay on the medication, and
Yeah.
peace, from an acceptance and commitment therapy point of view, peace is sort of accepting that this is their reality, and then still trying to figure out how to live their values within that.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's really cool. Dang, that's cool. I wasn't expecting that to be challenged on my title, but I love that so much.
Sorry. I know.
Makes
I mean,
sense.
so this is where, if I have, a psychotic disorder, that's, what does it mean to be at peace? What is, in the sense of, like even with the WHO definition, I may not be able, I mean, there are ways that I can contribute meaningfully to my community, but it's not the same as if I had full mental health, right? And so I still have issues and problems that really interfere some of the time with daily functioning. But can I be relatively at peace with the reality and live the best life that I can given the reality? Yeah.
That's so cool. So I want to reframe the question now, because now it seems like in my mind, I always thought it's peace being like this just state of being, right? But as we're having this dialogue, peace seems so temporary, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question like this. And it's cool because you've been an executive coach for a long time too. So I think you'll be able to answer this in a good way. How can a person live their best life? What are some practices or some steps that they could take to live their best life?
Got it. So I would first say, how do they define best, right?
Yeah.
In terms of best life, and to clarify that for themselves, right? Is best life, kind of pie in the sky and you can never reach it, and so you're always falling short? Or is it viewed as some idealized goal, recognizing you'll never reach it, but it's something to work toward? One of the things that I'm doing a deeper dive now is, as I mentioned, acceptance and commitment therapy. And so they, might say, I don't want to paraphrase them because I'm not deep enough in yet, but something like,
sorry to interrupt this podcast. I hope you're enjoying it so far. I want to take a quick moment to tell you about our presenting sponsor, Blemish. Blemish is a tech startup founded in Atlanta and being built in Paris. The one goal of Blemish is to build imperfect people for a better tomorrow. To learn more about how Blemish accomplishes this goal, visit blemish.com. That's BLIMISH.com. If you enjoy hearing from psychologists and learning about the science of the mind, visit blemish.com. If you're ready to start your own mental health journey, or you want to get more information about how to do it, visit blemish.com. If you value personal growth and obtaining information to help you reach your highest self, support our presenting sponsor and visit blemish.com. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
well, in order to understand what living my best life is, I have to understand my values, right? Because it's the values that give me meaning and help me figure out what my goals are, right? Because I can create goals, but if they're not actually aligned with my values, I won't necessarily feel like I'm living my best life.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it sounds like so far I've noticed two steps, right? The first one is to define what best is, like what your best life is. And then two is to define your values, right? And then would three be make goals, set goals based on? Right.
Actually, first is, I would say, what are your values? I would say the first one is your values, because it's really going to inform what your best life is. So values and then best life. So that sort of best meaning meaningful in that way.
Yeah.
And then that helps you figure out what your goals are of how to get there. So, your goals are informed by your values and how you'd want to live that. So someone who says my best life is to be rich, right? Okay. We see this story all the time where people are rich and they're still not happy.
Yeah.
right? And they never have enough, and how much. So that's where it's like, well, what are the what is it I want to do with my money, or what is it that I want to, what will having money give me in terms of meaning? So that's
that's really, really cool. Yeah, and I think that's valuable too, and it's funny for me because when I first started therapy, that was one of the first things that my therapist had me do is identify my values. So it makes sense. It
it
makes
does.
sense. And
And
so
one of the things we're finding in the pandemic, right, is that people are really reevaluating their values. What do they value? What is a meaningful life?
Right.
What is it that they want, would make them happy when they wake up? And happy is a transient state, but sort of what feels like it's a life well lived.
Yeah.
And again, with the pandemic and people's lives, for many people really becoming narrower and unbelievably stressful. It's how do I want to live my life?
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. And are you based in New York now?
I am.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. It sounds like New York. I love it.
Yeah, you can hear it.
That's awesome. So I want to ask you one more question, just in this vein, before we kind of transition into talking about your business. So you've been an executive coach, right? And what is one or two characteristics that the most impressive people that you've coached have possessed that played a part in their success? If that makes sense. And I can ask it again in a different way.
So I'm gonna pull it apart, and because there are two pieces, I think. So one is what most impressed me, which is not necessarily the thing that gave them success.
Yeah.
So, I've been impressed when people I coach are really open to learning. And want to learn. Sometimes it's so that they can be more successful, right? But sometimes it's because it's just for the sense of mastery and to be a better leader or to be a better manager. That it's its own motivation. It's not. I guess it depends on how you define successful, right? They want to be successful by their own standards, right? Versus, whatever someone looking from outside might think, right? So, yes, there's a lot to be said. Oh, she's such a great manager, but it's more, I want to be a great manager. What am I doing what do I need to be doing better or differently in order to be a better manager or leader or whatever.
Yeah. And personally, I would define, like, my own personal version or definition of success is, setting goals and achieving them, right? Like, have you ever had someone where you're like, dang, every goal that they set, they hit? Has that happened in your experience?
So I think part of being successful is also having realistic stretch goals, right? Because I think people sometimes get stuck because they actually have unrealistic goals and they can't meet them, and then they feel really bad about themselves. I see this play out in a lot of different ways. I'm going to use a weight loss analogy because it's got numbers, and so I like that better. So let's say someone wants to lose 20 pounds. They lose 19. They can't get that extra pound off, right? All these months of work, all this sacrifice, all this exercise, and they're going to come away feeling like a failure, right? Rather than a kind of, I want to change my lifestyle to have a healthy lifestyle. In theory, I should lose weight. I will use the weight as a metric of, I'm doing these things well, that's a whole other question, right, of whether that's an appropriate goal or metric. But it's if they lost 19 pounds, they had 19 times to feel really good, right, with each pound they lost. They had 19 opportunities to feel really good versus they missed the mark at 20. So, I think success is what you said, and it includes the concept of setting realistic stretch goals or realistic goals so that you can be successful.
Yeah.
And of course, then we get into context, right? Because sometimes the world makes it really hard to be successful despite your own best efforts.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. And that's a wealth of knowledge that you just shared there. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm just riffing off of your definition, which I think is a really good one. But as long as the goals are actually attainable.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So let's talk about Living Their World Inc. Kind of give us your mission statement or vision statement, or just a high level view of what it is.
Sure. So we use what we know from the research about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to help address issues of bias and disrespect in the workplace and upskill people for respectful engagement, because none of us is ever going to get it all right. So we use virtual reality as part of our program to really put you in the feet, if you will, of people from different demographic groups to really, understand what it's like, the ways that unintentional disrespect, microaggressions, discrimination play out, and how every person in the room who or not in a room, in a virtual world, experienced it, how each person can try to turn things around respectfully, right? And the idea of being open to feedback and learning, and how to do that and how to help other people do that. Yeah,
that's so cool. And I like how you mentioned disrespect, right? And I'm pertaining to a sentence in one of the articles that you have on SHRM.com, and it's titled "It's Your Viewpoint on Teaching Young Employees to Have Hard Conversations." And you say, without good soft skills, managing conflicts will take even more time and potentially lead to higher levels of disrespect and incivility in the team or work unit. So I want to talk about that. I want to share an example from my experience and kind of get your viewpoint on it. So I've struggled, in the workplace, just like being the youngest person, and then being the only African American. I've had situations where I felt like I've been disrespected and I don't really know how to deal with it. And so one instance, it was like my first or second week at the job, and I went to a networking event with my coworkers, and I pulled up, and we were in there just networking, and one of my coworkers asked me, he was like, "Hey, he was like, I love your car. How'd you get that? Do you sell drugs?" And it was like, even though it was kind of a joking thing, it was just like, it was hurtful. It was very hurtful, and I didn't know how to respond, so I just laughed it off, right? Yeah. But I'm still affected by it to this day, right? There's still some like animosity there. So sure. I guess is I want to get your viewpoint, but then I also want to ask you, like, how as a young employee do I deal with disrespect?
Got it. So my viewpoint is it was entirely inappropriate to say. Yeah. I think it's a dilemma because he probably didn't. The benign, interpretation is he didn't realize what he was saying and doing and the effect it would have. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We don't know. But I think particularly for younger people or people who it's not someone on the same level on the org chart. If it's someone higher up, it's hard to have those conversations. And it's even harder if the person seems to be really closed, or has what's called a fixed mindset. Like, I am who I am, which is why we try to really help people view themselves as having a growth mindset and open to feedback and learning. Part of it depends on that person, your relationship with with him, where he is in the org chart relative to you. Sometimes it can be. I mean, the dilemma is, of course, he is less likely to learn unless somebody tells him, right? Or he figures it out in some way. That's not your responsibility to teach him. It's super clear, but by the same token, because you are working with him, to the extent that he doesn't learn, it's not clear. It's going to come up in different forms over time, and so that's a dilemma for you, right? I mean, I just want to be super clear: it's not your job to teach him, but the downside of no one teaching him. So one thing is to actually find allies who can teach him. Right. So if there's someone at work that you trust, is to say, hey, this happened. It feels really awkward. Can you keep an eye out for opportunities to kind of, not even necessarily based in the past, but going forward, of just, if you see something, say something, so that he will learn, and allies help a lot. Right. I mean, really relieves you of the burden, the double burden, right, of both being the recipient and having to intervene. So that's the first step, is really, are there any people you can trust enough to explicitly be an ally for you? It may be that they can find a way, or together you and the other person can find a way where they talk to the person about what happened, in a way that is a learning opportunity versus shame and blame, where then the person is like, doesn't really want to see it or deal with it. But it's like, hey, you probably didn't realize this, and it's sometimes perceived as a joke in movies, but in real life it's kind of a different thing. And so for the ally to say that, I mean, you can say it, to find a way to say something, depending on your relationship with him and how open he is to feedback and learning. So if there's ever an opportunity, if there's ever DEI type training at work, right, that's another opportunity of just having a conversation. It really opens the door to the conversation. And you can also just ask questions, like, hey, when you said that, where'd you get that idea? And he may, I mean, again, depending on who he is, he may just say, "Oh, I was joking." But and that's fun, But you asked, and so that's kind of like a that's going to make him think. It's still, the burden is on you then. And so, I don't know if is any of this helpful or.
Yeah, all of it is very helpful. I wish I would have known you a year ago.
It's never too. But if he hasn't changed, if he fundamentally hasn't really changed, there's a sense in which it's never too late. Find an ally. If the two of you go to an event, if there is a moment of you don't want to be too vulnerable until he's proven trustworthy, but to me, okay. It's hard. I'm sorry.
It's okay. But that's very, very helpful. And I'm sure, it'll help other, my listeners too, because it's not just me, right, who has to deal with like disrespect in the workplace, right? So I know that other people watching this have probably experienced the same thing or will at some point. Maybe, hopefully not, but maybe, right? So I think this is what you shared is very, very helpful. And it'll hopefully help a lot of work situations. So thank you for
Sure.
sharing that.
I mean, in the moment,
Yeah.
sometimes just asking a question like, hey, I want to make sure I don't take this the wrong way. What did you mean by that? Right?
Yeah.
So even just that question, or, I don't want to jump to conclusions about what you're saying there. Can you say that in a, different way? Even with that joke, it's sort of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. What was I trying to say? Right. He made me have been trying to bro you, or something. It may have actually been trying to come from a good place, but the execution was really bad. Yeah. So anyway, in the moment, asking questions like, hey, what do you, I'm not sure I understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah. Well, I think this is a great subject and something that I think is very helpful. So for those listening who want to just learn more about this subject and maybe even speak with you, where should they go?
Come to our website, liveintheirworld.com. You can click on contact us. There's a ton of stuff to read. I have a Dear Robin column every month, and you can anonymously post a question. Just go to the Dear Robin tab, where I answer specific situations like the one you just said, right? Like, this, what should I do? This happened to me. We have our own podcast called Their World, and maybe useful information. I'm on LinkedIn, Robin Rosenberg, psychologist. There's Live in Their World has a LinkedIn page. We're on Twitter. Our handle is live and then the letter N, Their World, because that was all the letters you could have. So yeah, a bunch of ways to reach me.
Yeah, awesome. So you're very accessible, which is amazing. And again, thank you. This was great. I really thoroughly enjoyed spending this time with you.
Me too. You asked such great questions. I love your mission. I love what you're doing, and it gave me a lot of food for thought. So thank you for that.
Awesome. I'm glad. You're welcome. So everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Your Visionary Podcast. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace. And now this part of the episode is where I go over 3 main takeaways from the previous episode. This episode with Dr. Robin was a complete masterpiece, in my opinion. I love the way she thinks. The way her mind works is very, very fascinating. And the 3 things that I took away, number 1 is, in order to live your best life, you must understand your values, because your values give meaning and help you figure out what your goals are. And I think that's so crucial, because a lot of people want to live their best lives, right? Like I do, I'm sure you do. And there are different ways to do that, right? And the second thing is that when you're dealing with disrespect in the workplace, find allies, and allies are so important. And if you know me, you know I'm a strong believer in the fact that you're always one connection away from living out your dreams. And so I think that goes hand in hand with finding allies in the workplace and beyond. And number 3, she said part of being successful is having realistic stretch goals. Man, that's so key, because I think as visionaries, we dream so big and we might have goals that are unattainable, right? And I think it could be helpful to also have realistic goals and really be able to hit your goals, because when you hit your goals, you get a dopamine hit and you gain momentum and gain confidence, and both of those things are important when it comes to just living your best life, right? So there it is. Those are the 3 takeaways from this episode with Dr. Robin Rosenberg. Make sure you use her as a resource and just tap into what she's doing. And thank you for watching this. Thank you for listening. Peace and love.